Hello. In this demonstration, I will show how to run a Spark notebook on Databricks. I'll show how to create a cluster, import a notebook, use libraries, work with the local and cloud-based file system, and upload and download files. So this is mostly about just getting started with Databricks. So first, I'll demonstrate how to create a cluster. I will import a notebook using a URL from GitHub and from a local computer. I'll run a notebook just a little bit just to, run it. I'll show how to import libraries. This is mostly for PySpark, but I'll also show how to create and import Java or Scala-based libraries for PySpark. Not everything can be imported with pip. Instead, some things have to be imported on the Databricks cluster using the creation of the library and attaching that library to your cluster. Show how to upload and download files and other ways to import code besides just importing the notebook. Inside the notebook, you can run in Databricks, there's a magic command pip where you can say pip install. You can also do the standard use of pip. You have a shell and then run pip in the shell to run install and then some Python libraries. Now, not everything installs in that way, and so instead you have to use in Databricks the Databricks library creation and then attach that library to your cluster. A couple examples will be John Snow Labs Natural Language Processing, or NLP. You have to search the Maven repository and attach that, and I'll show how to do the same with the Spark NLP that goes with it. Just a bit more details on importing files and importing code. One thing that'll be important to know is how to upload files to Databricks. And just noteworthy that there's two different file systems. One is your local file system. So if you have a single node cluster, then you can do most of your work on the local file system. And that's the case for the community edition of Databricks. And most people will just use the local file system. You can use the cloud-based file system, the DBFS for Databricks file system, which underlying it is, say, Microsoft Azure as a cloud-based file system object store. And I'll show you how to, in Databricks, you'll upload to this DBFS. And then once you have that, typically then for the community edition, you'll copy a file to the local file system to run some examples. In order to do that, you're going to have to go to the settings in Databricks and look at the admin console and change some workspace settings. And there you'll have to check the Databricks file system DBFS and ensure that that's enabled. That'll allow you to easily upload and download files. So once you have that, you can go to the data setting in the Databricks command, and there you'll choose the database file system upload. And if you do that, then you can drag and drop some files or select some files to upload from your disk drive of your local computer to the Databricks. And I'm showing that here by just dragging and dropping some files over to Databricks. Once you have those files uploaded to the Databricks file system or DBFS, you can process them there, but often many examples that you'll find in textbooks assume implicitly, if not directly, that you have some files stored locally. So using the magic command for the file system, which is for DBFS, you'll copy from that Databricks file system to your local computer, that is the Databricks driver. And that's shown here, and I'll demonstrate that. So just a reminder that you have these two file systems, the Databricks system and then the local computer. And when you're using the file system magic command, it's assumed that you're working with the Databricks file system. And if you want to reference that local system, then you have to prefix your path with file. On the other hand, if you're doing a shell then it assumes the local file system. But if you want to access the Databricks system, you have to prefix your path with dbfs. And I found that actually it's important other times as well to prefix with your path with dbfs for the Databricks file system. Here's an example. If I have a command cell where I use fs, I can use remove and copy and move the typical Linux, Unix commands in the file system. Here I'm listing some files I don't have to prefix with dbfs. But even though here I'm in the Databricks file system, the magic command fs, I need to, for whatever reason, prefix with dbfs in order to delete a folder. And it doesn't work for me without it. Maybe it works for you, but you have to do remove and then -R for recursive. And then here's the folder, and it'll delete all the files there. So I'll demonstrate that. Just a reminder, though, that sometimes, even though you're working with FS, the file system, dbfs, you still have to prefix on occasion, and it doesn't hurt to go ahead and be explicit, include it in your commands. Additionally, you might want to download from Databricks to your local computer. And if you look at the documentation on this, it describes how to do all of that. And I'll show you the documentation where everything I'm presenting here is described in great detail. But essentially what you want to do is, if you're on the Community Edition cloud, you've got this prefix, which is your cloud for Community Edition. And then you have this files, and that refers to the file store. And then within your file store, whatever file you want to download, you'll just include it. So I'll use this URL, and then my file that I want to download. In this case, it's wordcount.py. The Y is all the way over the end. In addition to that, I need to pass in this ID. It's $O equals. And here's an example in the documentation. And if you look in your web browser, you'll see that a lot of your browser URL has this O, which is the identifier for your space on the Databricks cloud. So you'll need to include that if you want to download a file. So here's the URL, and then just put in your, not the one that listed here in the slide, but your own identifier. That allows you to download files. Well, there's a number of ways to import code into Databricks. The common way is just to refer to a URL for your local, you can drag and drop your local, from your local file system to the Databricks cloud, or give a URL, say, to a GitHub repository to view a notebook. Another way to get code in is you've got a notebook or, PyCharm, something opened up on your own computer, your notebook computer, let's say, and then you copy it from there to the browser and just paste it in. That's an easy way to do it. And the last way is using the method I showed in the previous slides, is that as you have a file on your local computer, you upload that file. And once you upload it, then you can import that file into your interpreter. Final way, I'm not going to demo, if you have not the Community Edition, but the commercial edition of Databricks, you can connect your IDE like PyCharm or whatever you might use. It's your IDE. You can connect it to Databricks as described, and then you can execute your commands locally and they run on the cloud, or you can upload files and so forth. So if you have a commercial version of Databricks, you might want to look into connecting your IDE to the cloud. So just an example of how to copy and paste. I've got a file here that I've grabbed from a textbook. I'm just going to copy the lines of code and I'll paste it into my notebook in the cloud, and then of course I can run it. I can upload. Here's a file I've got. I just upload it to the cloud as I showed before how to upload. And then once I have it there, I can import that into my interpreter. Well, first I have to copy it over to the local file system. And then I do something like, from whatever the module name is, word count, import star, and then I can run all the commands. Okay, so let's see if we can get this to work and do a demo. Here I am in my browser, and I just want to point out that everything I'm going over is on the Databricks documentation. So if you go to docs, databricks.com. Here I am in notebooks, and it describes how to do the notebooks in detail. And you can also look at the details for the Databricks file system, and as well as libraries and also files in general. So I'm just summarizing the important bits of that I use, and I'm going to demo it now. All right, so once I've logged into Databricks, I'm going to create a cluster. So let me start that. You just hit the compute menu here on the left, and you can create a cluster. And I'm going to call it demo, data demo, just for fun. Okay, and then you can select a runtime. Standard runtimes are ML for machine learning runtimes. The machine learning runtimes have already built in a number of libraries, so you don't have to import them. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And I'm going to create the cluster here in a moment. But first, I want to note that when you create a Spark interpreter, Spark instance on, say, Google's Colab, or GKE or whatever, you can specify the details of the interpreter when you create the environment. Here, the Spark is created for you, and if you want to configure it, then you're going to have to use this menu item to configure it. So why might you do it? Here I've got a notebook that requires that certain properties be specified in the runtime. And you might create a Spark environment, and normally you'd pass these parameters to the creation or building of that interpreter. But if you're doing it in Databricks, you can't build your own Spark interpreter. Instead, you have to use the menu item here to create a cluster. So what you can do then is pass in this user interface any of the parameters you want to set for the Spark environment. And I'm not going to use these for this demo, but I just want to show you that this is here because you might need it. So you can set, in this case, the serializer for Spark and max buff for size and whatever else that you want, you can specify here. Now, a lot of people also specify that they load some jars, and that's not going to work here, but I'll show you another way to attach libraries to your cluster. Anyway, so you can specify some Spark configurations. You can find more details about it if you look at the help. But so now, I would say normally if you're just a beginner, you typically don't need this, but you might find out that one of your example programs require that you set certain properties, and this is where you'd set those properties for your Spark interpreter. Let's go ahead and run it. So I'm going to go ahead and create this cluster. And here we go. It's going to take probably 3 minutes. I'm going to pause it here. All right, where are we in the demo? In the demo, we've created a cluster, and it's still being created. I'll get that moment. Let's go ahead and import a notebook, and let's see how that can be done easily. So I'm here in my workspace. I've got a folder into which I want to put it. You don't have to put it in a folder, but I've got one here. I'm going to say import, and I can import a notebook. That's the easiest first thing to do. So I'll have a URL, and it's going to go to some sort of, well, you can see here some of the formats, the Databricks code DBC and so forth. You can also do classic Python, IPython notebooks. I'm going to go to this website, my website for this data demo, and I'm going to grab a notebook here. Let's do stock price just for fun. And this is a DBC Databricks code, I guess. I'm going to copy the URL, and I'm going to go back here and paste in the URL. Now I'll import that, and it takes a moment, and it's going to move from GitHub to the Databricks environment, importing the notebook. So here we go. Yeah, here we go. So here's the notebook. Another way to do it is to import it from your local disk drive, and I can just drag and drop. So I should have a notebook that I've set up here. It's another one from my data demo, Python regression. I'm going to drag and drop that notebook, and I can import it. So you can import it from a URL, or you can import it from your local computer by drag and drop. Okay, there we go. We've got two that I've imported. Let's see if my data demo is still being built. Back to our list of things to do. Created a cluster. Oops. So that's still ongoing. Showed you how to import from a URL and from your local computer. In a moment, I'll just run a little bit of that notebook to see that it's working. And I'll show within the notebook how to import libraries using pip. So we can look at that right now. So if you look at this notebook, if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that it has a magic command inside of Databricks notebooks where it's %pip, and then you can do an install. Or if you don't like that for whatever reason, or maybe they remove that, you can open up a shell and do the exact same command. And this will install it onto your local computer. Now I've got a cluster of size 1, so this is not going to be the way to do it if you have a large cluster, but I've got my community edition. I've just got one computer. I can do pip on this local computer and it'll install these libraries. So as soon as this completes its iteration, you can see it's taking a little time. We'll go ahead and run these just to show that it's working. Okay, my cluster has been built. It's no longer got a icon indicating that it's still working away. I can go to the clusters and see that it's active and running. So I've got a notebook here. It's attached to that cluster. And now I can go ahead and run it. The first part is just some text. There's nothing really there. And then here's some install of some libraries. And just to show that it works, I'm going to hit the play button, or you can hit Shift and return, and it'll run the cell. So here, what it's going to do is run pip to install these Y-Finance and so forth Python modules. It's going to take a little bit of time. And after that gets going, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing just to show you can do it down here as a shell command. Either one is fine. I would typically use the one that's this pip command because it's part of Databricks command set for magic commands. And it seems to be working. Okay, that's done. And just to show you, if it's a community edition, you just got a small, one computer, then you can install this way as well. All right, so that's one way to do it in library. So back to our list of things. Cluster, URL, computer, run a notebook. I just ran the notebook to install using pip. I did the notebook pip, and now on to a different way to attach a library. This would be more if you're going to have a cluster, or if you have a Java or Scala library. You can't use pip to install a Scala library, for example. And let's give an example of this. So I've got another notebook here. This notebook does some Spark analysis with natural language processing, and it requires Spark NLP library from John Snow Labs. And if you read through the details, you want to have a couple things. You want to have this, it's a Scala library. It's put in the Maven repository, and we want to install that and attach it to our cluster. And additionally, we can also attach Spark NLP, which is the Python library that's going to connect to this Spark NLP Java classes. All right, so I need to install both of them. So let me show you how to do this. I can't install it with pip. I have to go and make a library in Databricks and then attach that library to the cluster. So there's various ways to do it. One way is to go to my workspace and create a library. I've already done this before, but yeah, so let me get rid of this one. I'm going to go ahead and create one in here, create a library. And so I'll say create library. And in this case, the first version I'm going to, first kind of library I'm going to add is found in PyPy and it's Spark NLP. So here's my Spark NLP. And I'll say create that library. And it's going to access it from PyPy and then attach it to a cluster. Right now, I found this a little bit of an issue that sometimes Databricks gets confused and finds old clusters here, or in this case doesn't find my current cluster. But I wanted to show you this. Let me move around and see if it reappears here in a moment. There's other ways to do it, but I just want to show you that sometimes it will reappear. So back to my workspace. And where's my library? Here it is. Ooh, which one is which? I've got two now for some reason. Seems like Databricks sometimes there it is. It gets a little bit out of date, but okay, here we go. I select it. And now you see my cluster is there. So I don't know, whatever, some reason you have to refresh it. But so this is one way to install once I've created. So I've got sort of two steps. One step is I create my library here. And the next thing I'm going to do is attach to my cluster. So it looks like it's already installed, as you can see here, but I could try to install it, click on the install button here. Okay, and another way to attach a library to a cluster is go to your cluster itself. In the cluster menu, I'm going to select my cluster. I'm going to select libraries, and then I would install new here. And as you can see, it's already installed this library, Spark NLP. So I could reinstall it essentially, but I'm not going to do that. I just wanted to show you that there's two ways to do it. And one is in the workspace, I select the library I just created, and I then go on to select a cluster that may have not been installed on, and then install it. And the other way is go to the cluster itself, which is found in the compute menu. Select your cluster and go to libraries, install. All right, the other library is not there. So let me go to the other library. So what do I mean by the other library? Where's my notebook? Here's a Spark Sentiment notebook. And the other library it says that I need is this library here, this John Snow Spark NLP. And because I've done this, I already have some of my workspace, but I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. You can see it's down here in the lower left, but we're going to pretend it's not there. So I'm going to go to my compute. I'll go to my data demo, and here's a second way. So I can use this menu here to create the library just as I previously used my workspace. And I created a library here. That's one way. Go to workspace, create library. The other way is go to your cluster, which I am now. I've selected the library menu, and I'll install new. And now I'll get the same menu either direction, from the workspace or from the cluster. I'm going to select Maven, and then I'm going to put in my coordinates here. And I could have maybe the exact coordinates, but typically I get this wrong, so I'm going to do my search. I'm going to select the Maven Central, and I'm going to search for this particular library. Sometimes it gets a little confused, so let me just do the group part of it. And here's the library I want. John Snow Labs NLP Spark 2-12. These make a big difference because some are for different versions of Scholar than others. Just make sure that when you select the library, you select the one appropriate for your interpreter. So I'll select 4.1 for now, and I'll select it, and it should install it here in a moment. Okay, so just note that if you're using some of these packages that connect to, say, Google, BigQuery, or something else that requires a library of Java/Scala classes, then you'll probably need to do as I'm doing here, and that is, reference a Maven library, which is really some jar files. And then typically there'll be also a Python version that connects to those Java classes. So it's often that you'll have these two forms of libraries. So now it's installing, and it's when it's done, then hopefully I could run that example. I don't think I'm going to do it today, but I just wanted to show how to create a library and connect it. So can I go back to that notebook just so we can see? If you go to the notebook, this notebook uses John Snow Labs. It mentions that you should initialize your Spark configuration with these parameters. I showed you that when you create the runtime. It also notes that you'll need to have this John Snow Java package library attached to your cluster. I just got done showing you that. It's installing it now. And you also need to have this this Python Spark NLP library attached. And I did that as well. So, it can be a little bit complicated, but you've got parameters for your Spark config. You've got Java packages that are libraries attached, and then Spark, and then Python libraries. Okay, let's go back to the runtime and see if it all got connected up. It's my runtime library. It's installed. Okay, so that's how you can install libraries. Two different ways. Go to your runtime, as I mentioned, and then select your runtime and libraries. Probably an easy way to do it. Another way, if you're going to use the library multiple times, then you can go to your workspace and create a library. And once it's there, then you can attach it. Okay, so that was run through of creating a cluster, notebook URL, and local, running the notebook, two different kinds of libraries. Now uploading files and then maybe using it as code. Let's look at how all that would work. Okay, so let's go to a notebook that I've got set up for this purpose. And I've got a demo notebook, which I'm going to attach to the cluster that I've been using. And I'm just going to use this to look at the Databricks file system dbfs file store. So I use the magic command fs, and I do a listing, which is the Unix Linux command. And let's see what's there. And hopefully in a moment I'll show the same thing that I can find if I go to Data in the menu, Databricks file system, and file store. So what do I see there in file store? Come on, computer. Sometimes this thing's a little slow and buggy, but okay, you can see Amazon model, Gutenberg books, and so forth. There's a bunch of things there. So I go now to where I did the listing, and maybe not in the same order, but there's my Amazon, Gutenberg books, and so forth. I'm going to go ahead and upload this, Gutenberg books in a moment, but first I want to delete it just to show that I can delete it. So I gave a listing, and I've set this up. I've got this Gutenberg books. I'm going to go ahead and delete them. So I use the file system here. As I mentioned in my slide introduction, I've got Databricks file system dbfs. In this case, I'm going to prefix it with that for sure because I'm trying to delete this folder or directory. Let's give this a go, see if it works. I run it. It says it's true. Hopefully that means it worked. I'll do a listing again of the file store, and I don't see it there, and I can go to the data, dbfs, file store, and I don't see it. Let's see if, come on. Yeah, I don't see it, so it seemed to work. Yahoo. All right, so I was able to delete it. For fun, I could do a local make directory, and what I want to do now is upload this Gutenberg books. I know I just deleted it, but that, I just want to demo this. So let me go ahead, and I've got this Gutenberg books here on my local computer, and I want to upload it from my computer to the cloud. So I select Data, dbfs, File Store, and Upload. Okay, now I can drag and drop, and hopefully this will work. I'm just drag and drop over right now, the folder. Choose done. But, I've already done this, but you can see there's a word count program and a word frequency program. I just want to show that I can upload whatever, so I've got these other files, and these are Python files. And same thing, I just, go to data, DBFS, select file store, and upload. And then I, drag and drop, or I can go to select a directory on my computer and upload it. It's that easy. So now let's go ahead and do my listing again and see if it's there. And there's my Gutenberg books. Yahoo, it worked. And just to scroll down and see if I have the other, I've got the word count program, word frequency program uploaded. I did it before, but hopefully you get the idea. So now I want to go ahead and move this or copy this Gutenberg books from where it is on the DBFS, which is an object store on the cloud, to my local computer, because as you'll see in a moment, I've got a demo. So, this is what my students do. I've got a demo from a textbook, and I've got this code here, and I want to run it. And I've got a word count and a word frequency, and the textbook has this here, and I just want to put that into my notebook and run it. And so the idea is I'm going to run this program, which I have here. This is from the textbook. It's going to read some data. And let's get rid of this for now. Pretend that I hadn't. All right, so where is it going to read the data from? It reads the data from this data Gutenberg books in a particular file. So what I did was as you saw, I uploaded the Gutenberg books, and now I'm going to copy those to my local computer. That's this command here, this file system command. It's going to copy from the file store, which is Databricks file system, to my local computer. That's starting with file, and it's going to put it in oops, I think I put it in driver. Maybe I should have made a folder for it. But okay, so there it is, and there's the files. And so now I'm ready to run my program that I got from my textbook. And you might notice here that this is the builder of my Spark session. And I'm leaving that out because I already have it built, as you recall from the very beginning when I made my cluster Spark session, and Spark is created for you. All right, next up, I'm going to go ahead and read this data, which I just uploaded to the file store. That's the Databricks file system, and then I copied to my local driver, which is under data. I guess you could look at the overall path if you're not familiar with the Databricks and see what the path looks like. So see what the path looks like. So you can see we're by default in Databricks driver, and within driver, I can see, I can go ahead and copy this, see what's there. And you can see that data is a folder I have. And if you look inside data, it's the Gutenberg books. So I'm ready to read it, and let's go ahead and run this program. And it's going to have an error. Just want to show you the error. And it's going to say, hey, you have to have an absolute path. You can't use this relative path, so it has to begin with a slash. And let's go look at the books. You see the books here are underbar, and if you look at the original books, they are dash. So look at this couple things. There's a dash there, and there's underbar there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment this out so you can see what it is. And now I have my Databricks driver path that goes to data, and there is the file I'm trying to get to from my textbook, and it's an underbar instead of a dash. So now hopefully it'll work. Do the shift return. It should read this local file and process it, which it is right now. So I've been able to upload some files through the Databricks file store on the DBFS and copy those from the DBFS, the Databricks file system, to my local Linux computer, and it's under the Databricks driver. And under the driver, then I read them. And so I slightly altered the textbook, gave me this, and I changed it slightly. And now the rest of the code seems to work, and I get my word counts. So I mentioned you can also upload other things, not just data, but you could upload code, and you could have a word count or other program, which I have here too. I've got a word count and a word frequency program, Freaks. And as I scroll down, I just want to show that I can copy those again over to my local file system, and you could look to see that it's there. So I'll do ls just to see that this copied over my word frequency, and you can do the same with word count. Okay, now I've got my word frequency program. Let's go ahead and import it into this Spark session, and ran. And then if I looked at the program itself from the textbook, it has this program here, and I've just imported it, process, this whole file imported, and there's a program called process word frequency, and I'm going to run that. So one thing I did do is I make sure the path is proper. So it's the file, it's a local file, Databricks driver, data, and then the file. I'll go ahead and run this program, and hopefully it'll run. And then I can look at the results here. Look at the result. And it shows the word frequency. Okay, so that seemed to work. So what have we done? Well, it showed you how to create a cluster, import a notebook from a URL and from a local computer, run a notebook, use the local notebook's pip command, and also use the Databricks library to attach a library to a cluster. I uploaded files, both data and Python files, and I showed how to import that code from the Python file using the import statement into the session. So that is pretty much that. In this demonstration, I showed how to run a Spark notebook on Databricks, creating a cluster, importing a notebook, use of libraries, both using pip locally and also using create a library and attaching to a cluster, uploading files for data and code, and showed how to upload and download. So I hope it works for you.